Hi, welcome to the Healing Broken Families podcast. I'm Barbara Lapointe, your host, and each week I am honored to host conversations around divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict personalities. Today I am delighted to be sitting down with best-selling author from Dubai, Farah. Farah has been featured on Fox, CBC News, NBC, and ABC News. She's written a beautiful memoir called Meher and Me. It's a mother-daughter relationship memoir about the life we choose for the lessons we learn. I'm going to be asking Farah about this memoir and why the mother-daughter relationship is so important, and why we might consider reading her best-selling book. I can only imagine there might be a few tears dwell up in me as I think about my own mother, and I think about the role of mother in me, because really our moms, our relationships with our moms are at the core of everything we need to crack the recipe for deep healing. In fact, the father of mindfulness, Thich Nhat Hanh, says, you carry your mother in every cell of your body, and you have to look deeply to see that she is, in fact, always with you. I know there's been many days where I've longed for my mother. One of my favorite mentors, Mark Wolin, the father of inherited family trauma, says that pain moves through families over generations until someone is ready to feel it. And I will close before we invite Farah into the studio with another quote that I truly love. In fact, I had put this quote on all of my correspondences to my family lawyers during my 7-year divorce trial and custody trial. And it is a quote by the Ladies Magazine and Literary Gazette, Sarah Joseph Hale, from 1829. And Sarah says, there is no influence so powerful as that of the mother. Welcome, Farah. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you for being such a wonderful hostess and organizing us across the continent. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's an honor. I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to be revealed during our conversation, and looking forward to learning more about your best-selling memoir. Now, Farah, you have an impressive cross-cultural background. I'd like you to tell me about that, and I'm curious why you consider yourself to be a citizen of the world.
Well, yeah, the world's getting smaller and smaller, right, with travel. But I was fortunate, and I think sometimes through life, your greatest challenge or becomes your greatest strength in a way. And growing up, perhaps I didn't appreciate that. So I was born in London. Aged 4, my mother took me to India to visit my maternal grandmother. My mother was from India, and we ended up staying there. So I grew up in a little town in the north of India, which is Muslim by culture and Hindu mythology, because you're in India. I went to my mother's school, which was a Catholic convent, but we're Parsi by faith. So the religion is Zoroastrian. They're the ancient Persians, Parsi. It's a very small community, diminishing community. So yeah, it was a mix of Parsi faith, cultural influences from Hindu and Muslim cultures, Catholic convent where our morning assembly was Hail Mary. So yeah, there was a lot being absorbed at a very young age, and I think whatever as a child you're in is normal for you pretty much. So I didn't fully appreciate the breadth of the experiences I was having till I started traveling and seeing different cultures and different worlds and different people and meeting them and being able to relate to their experiences, because I had either seen it myself or experienced it myself or just been exposed to it. So it gives you a much wider perspective on life and people and just differences, which all of us are different, but the differences make it that much richer, I believe.
Absolutely. I can only imagine that helped to mold and create your self-identity.
Correct. It's taken a while to get comfortable in my skin, but as I've gotten older, I'm happy to be the sum of my parts. I don't have to be any one thing. You know, when we do the online forums and they go ethnicity, I'm always other because I don't conform to the 5 drop-down options that are on the menu. So it's fine to be other and it's fine to be me. And I'm very proud of who I am today, but it's taken a while to get to this place.
Beautiful. Now, you've written a best-selling memoir. Maybe before I ask my next question, tell us a little bit about that memoir.
Sure. So the memoir is titled Meher and Me. My mother's name was Meher, so it's homage to my mother. My mother was a very larger-than-life, extroverted, big personality lady. She was born in 1947. That's the year India won independence. So the children of that year are filled with a very particular kind of joy of year. They're very full of life. Her entire year group, I would say, they all have this particular characteristic. My mother was a lawyer. She trained as a lawyer. We grew up in North India. She was unconventional. So at a time in India where divorce or separation was not accepted and definitely not mainstream, she chose to leave my father and separate from him. She dated someone else for a long time, which had many raised eyebrows in the city, and then, eventually married him. I was obviously along for the ride. I was the child, the observer, not necessarily the participant in all that was going on the sidelines. And then when in 2006, by that time, I was living in Dubai. I had 2 young children. And at the end of February, there was an incident where some petty criminals were teasing my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, and my mother intervened and asked them to apologize. And one of them didn't want to. So my mother threatened to call the police. They ran away. The one who didn't apologize turned around, came back, pulled out a gun, said sorry to my mother, and my sister-in-law pulled out the gun and pulled the trigger at my mother. Mom, obviously, straight to hospital. Our small town couldn't deal with the injuries, so she was airlifted to Delhi, which is the capital of India, and I flew into Delhi. And then the journey. So the memoirs, our childhood, my childhood, Mom, the incident, and Mom is at the heart of the book. This is homage to her. And then how we lost her. She was in hospital for 25 days and then slipped away through internal bleeding. And then I don't know if you ever come to terms with it, but just the acceptance of it and the absorption of the event and how I've found a way to channel it and find some solace in knowing she's all around me. So the memoir outlines that. I hope I haven't given it away, and I hope your listeners will still enjoy reading it. But it's almost like truth is stranger than fiction. You might not have been able to script this. It was such a extraordinary incident that occurred.
And just to confirm, Farah, how old were you at that time when your mother was shot?
So I was 36. So 2006. I'm a 1970s baby. So it follows year on year.
And I'm curious what your experience was between the moment you received the news that your mother had been shot and at the time that you'd arrived at the hospital to see your mom. What are some of your strongest emotional memories in those moments?
So I think we'd start with disbelief. When the call came, it was in the middle of the night. and you're groggy, and my stepfather said to me on the call, your mother's been shot, you've got to come home. So you can't quite absorb that news, like you're processing it, but you're like, how could that have happened? And why could that have happened? And surely that hasn't happened. But at the same time, you're operating on autopilot that I've got to get to my mother. So you still have to do the logistics of, you still have to book a flight. And my husband at the time was out of town. So it was making sure he could be back in town so I could leave my children and travel to India. I went into the office just to hand over my work and let my boss know that I would be taking emergency leave. And at that time, no one knew what to expect, and I didn't know how long I would be gone for. I remember people calling me through the day because my flight was not till later in the day. And I think no one expected my mother to survive, and they wanted me to get home as soon as possible. And when I arrived in Delhi, so up until that point, you're on autopilot going through the motions of travel. And it's as you walk in and you start seeing the hushed tones and the somber faces and the whispering and the tears and the sort of hugs as if to console you and steel you for what you're going to see. And then I walk into the ICU and I see my mother, and the visual impact of seeing someone who's so vibrant and full of life in a bed strapped to, all sorts of contraptions is just hits you hard. And that's when the message really lands that, okay, mom's fighting for her life, and we don't know if she would survive. And I don't think anyone expected her to survive in those early days. It was a miracle that she did. She almost got a little bit better before she slipped away. So it was a whole roller coaster of emotions, probably would be the best way to summarize that period of time.
Yes, that's a lot that you went through. To provide even more context, I'm getting kind of curious about what your relationship was with your mom going back in time throughout your life.
I think that too went through many iterations. As a child, I think it was a mother-child, and as you get into your teens, I think there was a lot of angst. I was an angsty teenager, a little bit lippy, as she would say. So I would challenge the status quo, and don't talk back was a very constant refrain. Because in India, there's also this: children are meant to be seen and not heard. But I definitely wanted to be heard, and had a voice to match and an opinion to match. And so my teen years were a little bit stressful. I think because my father was also absent, mum was the only parent against whom I could rail and, vent. So I think she was definitely on the receiving end of that. As I grew older and I left, so when I was 18, I left India. And I think our relationship changed then because I became independent, I became an adult. And then you're more able to see your parents as just human beings and adults versus, someone who's so responsible for you. And I was in London at the time building my career, and my mother would come and stay with me. And those are very fond memories and some very fun moments with my mother. So that our relationship definitely changed to more friendship. And then when I had my children, it sort of further strengthened and deepened, because you may intellectually sort of appreciate it, but when you have your child, that sort of rush of emotion helps you understand the emotion your mother feels for you. And through my teen years, I know I questioned it a lot. But as I grew to be an adult, it was more evident, and it was softer. It was a softer relationship. So it was definitely a strong bond through my grown-up years.
Now, Farah, thank you for that. So your mother, in the book, you mentioned that your mother used to say that we choose our lives for the lessons we will learn. And I've been thinking about that. Because sometimes there's some very, very hard lessons. And obviously you went through one when your mother was shot. So talk to me about that.
I think it's if you believe in spirituality, or if you believe in soul families or spirits or afterlife, there is a theory that there are spirit families, and we choose the life, or we sort of almost amongst ourselves agree, in this next life I will be the father to you as the child, or I will take certain actions, and we will work out the karmic debt, if you like, over a series of lifetimes. So that there is this theory that is espoused. Mom was very spiritual and definitely believed in birth, rebirth, afterlife. And whenever I was facing a challenge, or was saying that something was trying, she would say, just remember, you chose this. I'm like, really? As a young person, you're like, really? Would I have chosen this in my right mind? Would I have really chosen this? But as you get older, you look back at the challenges, and if you have the tools and you're readily equipped, then it's not a challenge. But when the challenge arises, it's when you start developing new tools to handle a particular situation that you encounter. And it's only through those challenges and going through them that you find different avenues to develop different strengths or skill sets to help you overcome the challenge. And through that, you become stronger. We were talking earlier about, talking, and it's a skill set I've acquired through repetition as well. And it's similar to that when the challenge arises, you don't have the tools, but by the time you've come out at the other end, you have acquired a different set of tools to help you deal with that challenge should it come up in the future. And the person I am today may not have had the strength or the confidence to be who I am today had I not developed that strength through whatever I've encountered up until date. And there is that truth in it that I must have somewhere, somehow, before I even arrived, said, okay, these are the challenges that I will face in this life, and this will make me the person that I'm going to become. So that is what my mother used to say to me, and I've absorbed that more and more as I've gone through, and I reflect back and I see the wisdom in what she was saying.
There's a lot of wisdom in that. Farah, there's many people on the planet that have confronted profound challenges, profound loss, profound, acrimony, but they have not written a book. And you chose to write a book. And I was just wondering about the purpose in that decision to write this best-selling memoir.
I'm going to quote Elizabeth Gilbert. She says that inspiration doesn't come from you, it comes to you, in her book, The Big Magic. And you've got to find a way to harness it and define the outlet. And I think that's what happened. Whilst Mom had been in hospital, there hadn't been a spare moment, but whenever I was sitting down or waiting in the waiting area, I would journal and write about what was going on or my feelings. And after Mom passed, writing was therapeutic. And even my therapist, who I'd gone to at the time for grief counseling, would ask me to journal and just process my emotions and how did I feel. So I had all this content, if you like. And then one day, must have been 2015, 2016, I was sitting down with my laptop and the words just started flowing. And it didn't flow sequentially. It was almost like the first part of the book was the incident in the hospital of that whole period, because that is what I had been journaling and going through and describing and talking through with the therapist that I was dealing with at the time. So I had this sort of the heart of the story, if you like, and then the words just flowed and the rest of it came out. And it took me a long while to refine, to edit, to revise, to find the right tone, to find the right vocabulary, to even articulate everything that I wanted to bring into the book. And then certain decisions on what, was appropriate to share or not appropriate to share. We went through that whole decision making, and then it felt the right time. And, on the exterior, I might feel, someone might see me and think, okay, she looks very together, but they don't have the backstory. And it's about, if it touches people, if people can learn from it that you don't have to be defined by your background, or you don't have to be defined by your childhood, or you don't have to be defined by, as you said, the acrimony or the heartache or the grief. You can find a way to harness it and become a different version and use it to channel something good from it. It just felt like the right time for the book to give birth to the book, if you like, because it had been germinating for quite a few years. And I wanted to pay homage to my mother and to her bravery in the eye of adversity, in the eye of personal danger. She still stood up for what she believed was right. And I just think that is a quality that we should celebrate.
I'm really glad that you wrote the book, Farah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So I have a strange question for you. It might land on your side of the world in Dubai as strange, but I'm going to ask the question: Do you still have a relationship with your mother right now?
Strange as it sounds, I believe I do. When I'm in the car, I have very long conversations with her. I'm like, do you see what's going on? And how can this be happening with you standing guard? So I'd like to think I do. I definitely talk to her. People might think I'm slightly, losing my marbles if they see me. And it's loud verbal conversations in the car. And then if I'm driving, for example, and it's my birthday, and I'm like, Mom, I miss you. It's my birthday. I really miss you today. And this huge big truck will pull up alongside me at the traffic lights, and it's got her name alongside it. It says Al Meher Construction, and it's bright orange, and orange or saffron is the color of the Aztecs and the yogis in India. And I'm like, okay, you're there. I know you're there. So I like to think she's somewhere around us all the time.
That's beautiful. I'm going to follow up now. I'm going to read you a quote and just ask you to provide some feedback, emotional feedback on this quote. The quote's from Thich Nhat Hanh, and he's a Buddhist monk, a Zen Buddhist monk, and known as the father of mindfulness. And he says that you are your mother, and that your mother is in every cell of your body, and that one has to look deeply to see the fact that she is always with you. Oh, what comes
beautiful. That is beautiful. It's almost like you get a little chills. And it's true. Like, even if you think of it biologically, right? You come from your mother. You've grown inside of her and you come from her. So definitely there is part of that biology that's with you constantly. And she's the person that gives you life. So how can she not be with you, would be my thinking. I think that's really beautiful, and I would agree with it. She's constantly, and it's even if she's not physically there, not even on this plane anymore, her voice is still in my head. And if I'm doing something, there's a part of me that like, okay, Mom would say this, or Mom might do this, or guide me in this particular way, or what might Mom have done? So yeah, she's constantly with me. And if something great happens, she'd be the first person I'd want to tell, but she's not there. So it's kind of like, are you watching? I really hope you saw that, So she's there. She's there.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, I'll do one more quote for you. It feels right. It's a quote by Mark Wolin, and he's written a book called "It Didn't Start with You," and he speaks to inherited family trauma. And he says, Mark Wolin, that pain moves through families over generations until someone is ready to feel that pain. And so what comes up for you when I shared that quote?
It's true. And it sort of links back to when you asked me about the life we choose for the lessons we learn, because it's about the soul families, right? And that trauma or whatever the pain is it's repeated through cycles of families till someone says, I'm going to work on it and I'm going to address it. And I want it to not be repeated and passed down the generations. There's definitely truth in that, and I would agree with that. And there have been similarities in some of Mom's life and my life. And like, I've taken myself off to therapy to say, okay, how do we stop this cycle repeating itself? Because I don't want to pass it down to my children. There is great truth in that, and it's anything, until you don't shine a light on it, you're not able to fully address it. And you have to face it head on to deal with it, and to then find a way to resolve it so that it doesn't carry on through the families.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with it. I empathize with that saying a lot.
Thank you for that, Farah. Now, I can only imagine that you have some self-healing practices, or do you?
I mean, I do. Yoga's a big one. Huge fan of yoga. I even trained as a yoga teacher, and started a little yoga club at my previous, where I worked at my previous office. I just find yoga centers me. It gives me it's moving meditation for me. So yoga's a huge part of my life that I look forward to. Like, if I go through a weekend without having fit it in where I need it to be, it's sort of something's missing for me. It just centers me for the day, for the week, for the weekend, whatever that period of time is. I love cooking and I love baking, and food was a big part of our family. So for me, baking is very therapeutic. It's creative, but it allows me to focus on what I'm creating, and it brings joy on so many levels. It means food nourishes you, yes, as fills you up, but it also feeds your soul at some level, because it's an expression of love. Or at least it's my way of saying, I love you enough that I've spent the time in the kitchen to bake the cake that you like. And I hope it, fills your senses and feeds your soul. So that, reading, walking, exercise, I love the arts, I love music, I love dance. Anything that lifts your soul, for me, is something we should bring into our lives.
I couldn't agree more. Sarah, if someone would like to order your book or get in touch with you, I know you do speaking, and what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Thank you. They can come to the website, farahpress.com. We've got the links to the online portals to order the book. We invite people to share their experiences with us. They can connect with us and subscribe. I'm on Instagram. It's farah.press, so they can follow the activities as they're coming through. And we'd love to hear people's feedback once they've read the book and leave us a message. We'd love to hear from your audience.
Thanks for being here today, Farah.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
I want to acknowledge you for writing the book and all the wisdom that you brought to the show today.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
Thank you. That's all we have time for today on the Healing Broken Families podcast. If you liked this episode, why not give us a 5-star review on Apple? Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and all the best. Until next time, I'm Barbara Lapointe.
These clouds create the purest rain on earth. It falls on a remote tropical island in search of nature's best filter. Ancient volcanic rock. It's not just water. It's Fiji water.